Hey, this is Anney.
And Samantha.
And welcome to Stuff I Never Told You, a production of iHeartRadio.
And welcome to another Monday Mini, where I'm going to start with a content warning because I like to be sad. Anyway, content warning. We are talking about domestic violence and abuse and its portrayal in media. We're also going to talk about some celebrity beef. That's not content warning, but just, to let you know. Because recently, the movie adaptation of the book, It Ends With Us, has been all over my social media pages. But not because they're trying to advertise the movie to me or even give me a review of it. And I will tell you, I have never heard of this until now. I've not heard of the book. I have not heard of any of this until recently. And it's mainly because they have criticisms of the star. So if you don't know, Blake Lively and Justin Baldoni are the two that are starring in this movie that I know the most of. I know Jenny Slate is somewhere up in here. I don't quite know who is what. So I'm going to go ahead and put this right here. I know nothing about this book, nor about this movie. I know some of the context, and I know a lot of the drama that's happening around the movie. But with that, it did bring on a topic that we're constantly talking about, I feel like, all the time. We've talked about it with Twilight, and we'll end up talking about it when we finish up Twilight, that we still love. But how media often profits and portrays domestic violence and how it's romanticized. So I think we also need to remember that they oftentimes talk about these really serious subjects without understanding or giving an understanding of the full context or even the consequences of using this subject as a plot device or a plot line. And I think that's something that we want to talk about. Again, this is not a specific criticism about the book or the movie. I have yet to see it. Probably will never see it. I'm sure I'll get clips here and there from people, whatnot. If you've read the book, let me know. There's a lot of controversy behind that. There's a lot of controversy behind Colleen Hoover, the author of the book. And just for the gossip bit, I'll tell you, you ready for it? So apparently, Blake Lively, who was the producer, and then Justin Baldoni is in it as well. She's a producer and she's a star. He's also a star in it, but I think he directed the movie version. And something has happened where everybody's gossiping that they're either team Blake Lively or team Justin Baldoni. And they're saying that Justin Baldoni is looking at this movie as a domestic violence subject, rather, and he's taking it very seriously and making sure the way he approaches it, versus Blake Lively, who's coming in and seeing this as a YA romantic movie. Rom-com, if you will. And so approaching it very differently, even to the fact that in one interview that has been circulating pretty loudly, the dude who's interviewing her says something along the lines of, I'm sure you know that you're going to get a lot of fans coming up to you after this movie and asking you questions or advice. What would you say to those who have been in similar DV situations? And her response was very odd and went to oh, you mean give him my address, give him my phone number, give him my direct contact? Like she was really on the defensive to the point that everybody was uncomfortable except for her, because they were like, ha ha ha. No, that was a real question. What's happening? So there's been so many criticisms to her specifically, saying you were not handling this well. We know that you're not the arbiter of the answers for domestic violence victims, but it's reasonable to believe that people are going to see you and think that you are trying to portray something that they may have gone through, similar things that they've gone through, and are going to ask you advice and or questions about this. And she followed up afterwards with Instagram stories saying, we want to dedicate this to all the victims and whatnot. And they're so strong. And we know that they are. And if you are a victim of domestic violence, call this link, whatnot. As where Justin Baldoni immediately has been on we want to make sure we portray this correctly. Again, I might be on just one side of TikTok, but this is what I've gathered. We want, that the women they know that who have gone through this know that we were with them and we want to stand for them and all these things. And like has had a link to like resources for domestic violence victims and survivors. So all these things. So all these drama, which made me wonder about this situation. And when the book initially published, there were back and forth. There was a scathing review for the book as well. And here is one from Cosmo or Cosmopolitan. It says, a Hooverian plot typically kicks off with a relationship problem that drives the protagonist away, like in Ugly Love. And these are all books that she's written, I believe. The boyfriend character then uses physical abuse and manipulation to get his partner to stay. See November 9th, the book. The main character very easily forgives her partner for his dangerous transgressions. Without Merit, the book is just one example. And the boyfriend rarely, if ever, apologizes for his harm, like in It Ends With Us. Now, you could easily argue that these books are fiction and should be treated as such. But Colleen Hoover's books are extremely popular and leave an impression on young women, Hoover's primary audience, by casually portraying abuse as, quote, just how a relationship is supposed to look. This is the main reason it's worrying that It Ends With Us is getting a film adaptation. Given this book's popularity, it doesn't come as much of a surprise that Justin Baldoni, he apparently was the director of 5 Feet Apart, and Blake Lively happily joined the project. It Ends With Us follows the story of Lily Bloom and her doomed relationship with Ryle Kincaid. It traces Lily's life from her childhood in an abusive home to adulthood in an abusive relationship and her eventual escape from this tragic cycle. With Blake being the epitome of an it girl, you know the theaters will be filled with teens. So this was before it was actually filmed. And these new comments, have kind of done exactly what this article was afraid of, that this is emphasized in a way. Now, I will say there were women who watched this movie and said, I relate to this. This is my story, and was very, very excited to see it, or not excited, but hopeful, I guess, that the message was being spread. But their response was that Colleen Hoover and Blake Lively's response were not good and did not give the seriousness that it should have been attributed to. They really felt like they dropped the ball in how this could have been handled. Again, that one interview that I watched with Blake Lively was really odd, that she got on the defensive instead of talking about, well, these are amazing women. I don't know, I couldn't even be in their shoes, honestly, and I know it's a big honor that I can portray this for them. Point blank, like even if you have no experience whatsoever and that's all you really needed to say, or even if you have such a complicated subject, playing this role was difficult, but I hope I honored them. That could be just like, they didn't even, she didn't even need to give resources or stuff, because let's be honest, actors are actors. They're not necessarily someone who may know exactly what's happening. They don't understand the depth of their role. It's a job. I get that. But she's also an executive producer. So it kind of is to like, you took on a big charge. This is your movie. You need to understand just beyond that it was successful. And another part of the backlash to this was apparently Colleen Hoover was going to do a coloring book based on the story. And here's a quote from Slate about that. It says, the negative response was swift and overwhelming for obvious reasons. It Ends With Us is a book about domestic violence. Hoover detractors who say she romanticizes abusers had a new weapon in their arsenal. How can Hoover pretend she takes the subject matter seriously while creating cutesy juvenile merchandise? Only 24 hours after the coloring book's publication was announced, it was canceled due to pushbacks from both fans and critics. So here's another part to this. Colleen Hoover does have experience with her mother being an abuse victim. Her father was the abuser. Here's a little from hercampus.com. The afterword of Hoover's book is also very important. Colleen discloses in her afterword that she herself is a child of an abusive relationship. The author's own personal story adds an extra layer and personal struggle to Ryle and Lily's story. Hoover thanks and applauds her mom for leaving her dad to ensure she grew up in a healthy, safe, non-abusive household. Hoover's mom ended her cycle of abuse to ensure it didn't carry through into her daughter's life. This is mirrored in Lily's story, and Colleen reminds us once again of the complexities of domestic abuse. While Colleen Hoover's own mother and her character Lily eventually do leave their abusers, a lot of women do not. Many remain with their abusers because they're not just abusers, they are their husbands, boyfriends, fathers. They are someone they love and who they believe loves them. It is far more complicated than just leaving, and to pretend otherwise is disingenuous. So I felt like that article was specific to saying that this is a question. Like, is this book an actual romanticization of abuse? So the way that it is, the story, if I had not known anything about the drama, the celebrity drama, if you will, to the point that like Baldoni has hired a crisis PR crew, apparently. Like, I don't know, these could be just rumors. I'm just really caught up in celebrity gossip. I don't know why. But had I not known that, the advertisements, that because there are a few that I have seen, would make me think this is a funny romantic comedy with maybe a splice of drama in it, you know, like not knowing what that drama is. I will say, I think like Ryan Reynolds, her husband, has come on to rewrite scenes, and the way they come together to, again, advertise the movie does make it seem very lighthearted. At one point, there's another male actor who gets along really well with Blake Lively and have been a part of all of her publicity junkets. Like, he's been a part of it. Like, there was a little quip where Ryan Reynolds gets to like interview him and being like, oh, I see you're my wife's love interest, but I also have, you know, like being quirky and silly and like almost like a crossover for Wolverine, Deadpool and Wolverine with that movie. Like, I've seen a lot of that, but it turns out this story's about fleeing domestic violence. And I'm like, wow, I would have never known what that was. And that's really complicated, because how triggering could that be for so many who do not know anything about this? Again, like I said, I'm one of the few that are not. And then that complicated question, that conversation that we continue to have about why it's okay to profit off of these traumatic experiences without taking any responsibility in what they produce. Again, like, I am all about get your money, take your story, do what you need to. It's for you, you know, you have that right. So I have no problem with Colleen Hoover doing what she needs to do through her own trauma. But you also need to be aware when you make it big and you sell it to audiences and ask audiences to accept this, and fans to accept this and to love this and take this as something as a part of their heart, you know what I mean? Like, to love it as much as they do. You have to actually be responsible in helping to create a safe space for those people. And that goes with like executive producers who decided like, oh, I'm gonna make a lot of money off this movie, let's do it this way. And, you know, like, as well as the writers in this. Now, again, I'm not saying actors who have a job go in are necessarily responsible for other people's trauma. That's not what I'm saying at all. But I think there is that level of understanding that if you're willing to take a personal story like this that you think many will relate to, you also have to be willing to see where that level of trauma can take a person. Like, this has nothing to do with like people choosing to go see a movie. That's their choice. And just as much as it's their choice to leave, absolutely. But you can't be afraid to be like, yeah, this may be taken out of context, or this is a flourishment of what I saw, and I don't agree that this is healthy necessarily, blah, 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 blah. As we've talked about with like Twilight, again, I come back to that because we're like, that dude's a stalker. That dude, like, if we were comparing Twilight to, and I was actually, to Cult Girls, which we just read, it's similar. The whole like, oh, I know you're just out of high school, but if you want to have sex with me, we got to get married now. Like that, that kind of context is like, that's not as romantic as you think that is.
Yeah.
But again, with all of that, I feel like we have a responsibility to a certain degree of at least having the conversation behind it. Like, you need to be able to have that conversation with it in order to dispel the romanticism that is often misleading to younger people.
Yes, absolutely. It reminds me of our when we talked about rape revenge movies and how important it is if you're who's involved in filming that, who's behind the camera, who's writing it. And even if, it's just having some person on set who's very cognizant of, we need to be aware of these things. Like that is really important because something like that, it can be incredibly devastating or triggering to someone who's been through something like that. And I also think it's just better. It generally feels, it's more like, okay, this is coming from a place of at least somebody knows, somebody did some research or somebody is aware of the impacts of this. It's one of the things I dislike the most in media is when things are romanticized, that I'm like, this is actually, we really, really shouldn't be romanticizing this. And I'll say, of course, I got to bring it up from my fan fiction perspective. It used to be a lot like that, and that still exists. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
But it has shifted much more where maybe that exists, but that guy is now the bad guy instead of the like, oh, he's just troubled. Yeah. Now it's like he is bad, and I'm personally very glad for this because it has always bothered me. We're like, why are we attracted to this?
Why are you doing this? He's the worst.
But it's not even like, why are you attracted to this? It's like, why are we writing it like it is attractive?
Right.
Yeah.
And it's been around. I'm thinking my so-called life. Jordan Catalano was the worst dude in the world. And yet we all wanted him. And then he grew up and we all grew up. I was like, oh, never mind.
I mean, that's the thing. But that is the thing with when it's like a young adult.
Yeah.
It's really tricky. You have to keep in mind.
Right. And again, for those who love this book or are excited about this movie, I apologize. Again, I know nothing specifically about this book. I'm just going from what I'm reading and from the drama that has occurred from this. Because apparently Justin Baldoni, people are like loving him. The fact that he has emphasized the importance of intimacy coordinators. Like he apparently brought that up as a part of the way they filmed it. And he wanted people to know that, like, as well as like talking about, and I'm not putting him in pedestal. I know nothing about Blake Lively, y'all. Apparently all this stuff has come out. I don't even know if I've ever seen her in a movie. Now that I think about it, I don't think I've watched her in anything. I don't think I've ever seen her in anything. That's how little I know of her. I know she's apparently a great mother and a wife and great friends with Taylor Swift. So there you go. So no hate to that. I'm just saying, like, these articles and just in these subjects alone, and this just happened to be the hot topic of today, August 15th, 2024, which could change. But like, it is interesting when we have these conversations about who is the it couple and why, and then who we're celebrating and who we're not, and then how it's being handled after it's brought into public.
Yeah. There's definitely a lot to think about and unpack with this. I've got a lot of thoughts about this. Well, listeners, if you have any thoughts about this, if you have thoughts about the book or the movie or both, please let us know. You can email us at stuffmediamomstuff@iheartmedia.com. You can find us on Twitter at momstuffpodcast or on Instagram and TikTok at Stuff I Never Told You. We're also on YouTube. We have a TeePublic store and we have a book you can get wherever you get your books. Thanks as always to our super producer Christina, our executive producer Maya, and our contributor Joey.
Thank you.
And thanks to you for listening. Stuff I Never Told You is a production of iHeartRadio. For more podcasts from iHeartRadio, you can check out the iHeartRadio app, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your favorite shows.